A single father, a sweltering hospital corridor, an envelope that ended a career. What Dr. Ethan Carter uncovered in Baltimore's summer heat wasn't just a firing for insubordination. It was a calculated scheme to bury a mistake that could kill and silence the one man who refused to sign his name to it. A plan that would have worked if the sky hadn't thundered with helicopters dropping into a park and someone hadn't shouted his name in front of everyone. This is the story of how one choice to protect patients changed 3 lives and put Ethan up against an enemy still inside the hospital. A single father stood in a hospital corridor staring at paperwork that would end his career. Behind him, administrators counted spreadsheets while ahead of him, patients counted heartbeats. In Baltimore's summer heat, Dr. Ethan Carter made the choice that cost him everything. Until the sound of helicopters proved that some decisions echo louder than dismissal papers. The air conditioning in Lynn Wexler's office hummed with the kind of sterile efficiency she demanded from every corner of Rivergate Medical Center. Ethan Carter sat across from her, the August sun blazing through Venetian blinds and casting prison bar shadows across the polished desk. His scrubs still carried the antiseptic smell of the E, where he'd spent the last 12 hours saving 3 overdoses, 2 cardiac arrests, and a construction worker who'd fallen from scaffolding. Lynn didn't look up from her tablet. "Dr. Carter, we're terminating your employment effective immediately." The words landed like a diagnosis of something terminal. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "Because I refused to sign off on the equipment audit. Because you demonstrated ongoing insubordination." Lynn finally met his eyes, her expression as flat as the budget report she worshipped. "I've given you multiple opportunities to align with our operational directives. You've chosen to publicly challenge cost optimization measures that this institution requires to remain financially viable. The ECMO machine is 15 years old. It failed twice last month during critical cases." Ethan leaned forward, his hands gripping the armrests. "I put in writing that we need a replacement. You told me to make it work. The unit passed inspection. Barely. The next time someone needs extracorporeal membrane oxygenation and that machine fails mid-procedure, you'll have a wrongful death lawsuit that costs more than the $1.2 million for a new unit." Lynn's smile was practiced, corporate. "That's a risk assessment our legal team is comfortable with. Your role is to provide medical care within the resources allocated. You've made it clear you're unwilling to do that." Ethan thought of the combat medic tents in Kandahar, where he'd performed miracles with duct tape and prayer. He thought of the mass casualty event where faulty equipment had turned survivable wounds into body bags. He'd sworn then, never again would he let bureaucracy kill patients he could save. "I'm a doctor. I took an oath. And I'm an administrator. I took a salary." Lynn slid a folder across the desk. "You have 30 minutes to collect your belongings and exit the premises. Security will escort you." Ethan took the folder, but he didn't stand. For a second, he sat frozen, watching his own breathing as if he'd just received a diagnosis. This wasn't about pride. It was about survival. Because when you're a single father, getting fired isn't just a phrase. It's a date on a bill. It's the children's medicine expiring in the drawer. It's the appointment you've already rescheduled twice. And in that instant, a memory cut through. Sophie, 2 weeks ago, coughing in the middle of the night. The pediatrician had warned him to follow up. "Nothing serious," she'd said. But she'd also said, "Don't let it slide." Ethan felt his throat tighten. He'd lose insurance in 30 days. What if "don't let it slide" became too late? Lynn noticed his hesitation and mistook it for fear. She leaned forward, almost satisfied. "Sign off on the audit, and I can talk to HR." Ethan blinked slowly. It wasn't a proposal. It was blackmail in surgical gloves. Before we continue, tell us in the comments. Have you ever had to choose between doing what's right and keeping your job? And if you're new here, subscribe to follow emotional stories about courage, hard choices, and second chances. He didn't answer, just stood. And that's when Lynn delivered the final line, low, venomous, that he would never forget. "Nobody hires problem doctors in Baltimore, doctor." Ethan walked out. But the words stayed. And outside, he didn't yet know how true they were. The cardboard box felt heavier than it should. Inside, a photo of his daughter Sophie, a stethoscope his father had given him when he graduated medical school, and a plaque from the military thanking him for service in conditions most people couldn't imagine. Ethan carried it through the staff entrance, past nurses who looked away and residents who suddenly found their phones fascinating. Sophie waited on the bench outside, her backpack covered in butterfly stickers, her 8-year-old face scrunched in concentration over a library book. She looked up when his shadow fell across the page. "Done already, Dad?" "Yeah, sweetheart." "All done." She studied him with the unnerving perception kids develop when they've only got one parent to read. "You got fired, didn't you?" Ethan sat beside her, setting the box between his feet. The midday heat rose in waves from the asphalt. Across the street, Baltimore carried on, cars honking, people rushing to lunch meetings, the world indifferent to one man's professional execution. "I got fired. Because you wouldn't let them be unsafe?" He pulled her close, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Something like that." "That's stupid." Sophie closed her book. "Miss Henderson says doing the right thing is always right, even when it's hard. Ms. Henderson is a smart lady." They walked toward the bus stop, Ethan's mind already running calculations. Rent was due in 3 weeks. Sophie's school had a payment plan, but insurance, he'd lose coverage in 30 days. His savings could stretch maybe 4 months if he was careful, 6 if he was lucky. Finding a new position would take time. Hospitals talked. Getting labeled difficult in a network as tight as Baltimore's medical community was professional poison. On the way to the stop, Ethan opened his phone. An email was already waiting. System access revoked, then another. Credentials deactivated. As if the hospital wanted to erase his name before anyone could ask why. Sophie talked about butterflies and the school project, but Ethan didn't hear everything. His mind ran numbers and more numbers. Rent, groceries, medicine, gas, and one word that hurt more than any bill: blacklist. When they passed the parking lot, a nurse he knew, Marlene, veered away from him as if meeting his eyes would be dangerous. But at the last second, she turned back and whispered, "Doctor, it wasn't just the audit." Ethan stopped. "What do you mean?" Marlene glanced around. "There's more. And you're not going to like it." Before she could finish, the sound of rotor blades cut through the air. And Marlene went pale as if she'd seen a ghost. "My God," she murmured. "They came here for you." Sophie skipped ahead, then stopped. "Dad, what's that sound?" At first, Ethan heard nothing unusual. Traffic, distant construction, the ambient noise of a city in motion. Then it registered. Sirens, but not the familiar wail of ambulances he'd learned to tune out. These were deeper, more urgent, the kind that triggered muscle memory from deployments. His shoulders tensed automatically. The sensation was immediate, visceral, hot sun, dust in his throat, the metallic taste of adrenaline. He saw the field hospital tent, the convoy of wounded, the ECMO equivalent that had failed when they needed it most. 4 soldiers had died while he desperately tried to hand ventilate and maintain circulation. The investigation had cleared him, but the scream still visited his dreams. "Dad?" Ethan shook himself. "It's nothing." "Come on." But the sound grew louder. Now he heard it clearly, the distinctive thump of rotor blades, heavy and rhythmic. Military helicopters. His pulse quickened despite himself. He wasn't part of that world anymore. Hadn't been for 6 years. Whatever crisis was unfolding, it wasn't his problem. They turned the corner toward the bus stop, passing the small park where local kids played basketball. The helicopter sound became deafening. People stopped, looking up, shielding their eyes. Then 2 Black Hawks appeared over the buildings, descending fast. "Whoa!" Sophie grabbed Ethan's hand. The helicopters landed in the park, rotor wash sending up clouds of dust and scattering trash across the pavement. A crowd formed immediately, phones out, everyone filming. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to move toward the scene, but he forced himself to stay still. Not his circus, not his monkeys. He had a daughter to get home, a job search to start, a life to rebuild. The rear door of the lead helicopter burst open. A man in combat fatigues jumped out, followed by 2 medics struggling with a stretcher. Even from 50 yards away, Ethan could see the controlled chaos, 4 bags swinging, oxygen tanks strapped to the frame, the patient's body jerking in what looked like seizures. The officer scanned the crowd, then cupped his hands around his mouth. "Dr. Carter. We need Dr. Ethan Carter." The words hit Ethan like defibrillator paddles. He froze. Sophie looked up at him. "Dad, he's calling you." "I know, but it didn't make sense. He wasn't on any emergency response roster. He'd left the military." "He didn't." The officer spotted him, started running. "Dr. Carter." "Thank God. We've been trying to reach you for 20 minutes. I don't work. We don't care where you work. We need you." The officer was younger than Ethan, maybe 30, with the kind of intensity that came from active deployment rotations. "We've got a critically injured civilian. Offshore drilling accident. He won't make it to Hopkins without surgical intervention in flight." Ethan's medical brain engaged automatically, running through the logistics. "You need a trauma surgeon. Call Hopkins, have them." "We did. They can't spare anyone, and we can't wait. You're on our registry as the only surgeon in the Mid-Atlantic with verified experience, performing major procedures during medical evacuation under combat conditions." The officer thrust a tablet at him, showing a military database entry with Ethan's photo, service record, and a notation, "Approved for critical mobile surgery, extreme environments." Ethan saw his own photo on the tablet and felt his stomach turn. This wasn't a random registry. It was a specific program, one he thought he'd closed when Sophie was born. The officer spoke quickly, no embellishment. "You signed this protocol in 2018. Civil military response. Surgery during evacuation. Your name stayed active." Ethan opened his mouth to argue and closed it, because arguing cost time, and time here was blood. He looked at the stretcher and saw the detail no one in the crowd understood. The way the man's chest rose, short, failing, as if his body was giving up on maintaining its own rhythm. Ethan wasn't thinking about Rivergate, not about the firing, not about Lynn. He was thinking one thing. If he said no, this man would die here in the park, in front of Sophie. The second medic jogged over, breathless. Shrapnel wounds, internal bleeding, decompression sickness. He's got maybe 30 minutes. Ethan's mind shifted into the familiar patterns: airway, breathing, circulation. Shrapnel wounds meant debris in the peritoneal cavity. Decompression sickness complicated everything. They couldn't gain altitude without risking nitrogen bubble expansion. "I can't just..." He looked at Sophie. "Dad." Her voice was small but certain. "He needs you." The crowd had grown. Ethan saw faces he recognized, nurses from Rivergate, a couple of EMTs from his shift rotation, people who knew who he was. And then, pushing through, he saw Lynn Wexler, her expression shifting from confusion to recognition to something that might have been horror. She just fired the only person who could solve the problem in front of her. The officer followed Ethan's gaze. "Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but I need this man. Right now." Lynn opened her mouth, closed it. The calculation was visible on her face, the optics, the publicity, the fact that dozens of phones were recording. If she interfered and the patient died. Ethan looked down at Sophie. "I need you to stay safe. Can you do that?" She nodded, already pulling out her phone to call Mrs. Chun, their neighbor. Good girl. He kissed her forehead, then turned to the officer. What's your surgical setup? Basic field kit, plus what we grabbed from the rig's medical bay. We've got lights, clamps, some IV antibiotics. Anesthesia? Propofol, fentanyl, and hope. Ethan glanced back at the crowd for half a second, searching for Marlene. She stood frozen, pale, her hands trembling as if she wanted to apologize and run at the same time. He walked to her quickly. Marlene? What were you going to tell me? The nurse swallowed hard. They falsified the ECMO report. Ethan's stomach went cold. How? I saw the original file. I saw the corrected version. And I saw who ordered the correction. She looked without courage toward the hospital building. And then at Lynn Wexler, who had just arrived and now watched everything as if she were merely a spectator. If you can prove it, they fall, Marlene whispered. But if you try alone, they'll destroy you. Ethan was about to respond when the officer shouted from inside the helicopter, Doctor, now he's fading. Ethan took a step back. The sound of the rotors swallowed the rest of Marlene's words, but one thing became clear. The firing wasn't just corporate revenge. It was damage control. And if he saved this man, with cameras rolling, Rivergate would try to turn it into propaganda. The question was no longer, can he operate in the helicopter? It was, what would they do to bury the truth after he landed? Ethan was already moving toward the helicopter. The crowd parted. He climbed into the cabin, immediately assessing. The patient was strapped to a modified gurney, his abdomen distended, skin mottled. Blood pressure read 78/40. A makeshift 4 setup ran 3 different bags. The helicopter's interior reeked of fuel, blood, and seawater. Get me gloves, a field light, and every clamp you have. Ethan positioned himself, his hands already moving through the familiar choreography. I need someone on vitals, constant readout. And tell the pilot we stay under 5,000 feet. Any higher and the decompression bubbles expand. We'll kill him faster than the bleeding. The medic's eyes widened. That's going to extend our flight time significantly. Then we better work fast. Ethan accepted the gloves, snapped them on. The helicopter lifted and the world outside became irrelevant. There was only the patient, the wound, the narrowing window of survivable intervention. He worked with the precision of muscle memory, cutting away the temporary dressings the rig medics had applied. The shrapnel had penetrated the lower left quadrant and blood welled up immediately when he exposed the entry wound. He packed it with gauze, applied pressure, waited for the brief window of relative hemostasis. Saline, push it. I need volume while I locate the bleeder. The helicopter banked, and Ethan braced himself against the gurney frame, never moving his hands from the wound. He probed carefully, feeling for the torn vessel. There, superior epigastric. He clamped it, his fingers working by touch as much as sight in the cramped, dim space. Bleeding slowing, the medic reported. BP up to 85/48. Good. Now I need to see if we've got bowel perforation. Ethan worked methodically, exploring the wound cavity. Years of field medicine had taught him to operate by systematic quadrants when visibility was poor. Upper left, clear. Lower left, the shrapnel track. He followed it, palpating carefully. His fingers found it, a tear in the small intestine, about 2 centimeters. Small enough to repair if he worked fast, large enough to kill through sepsis if he didn't. I need sutures, absorbable, and irrigation. We've got a bowel injury. Inside the helicopter, everything seemed possible for 10 seconds. Until it stopped. The light on the field kit flickered, once, twice, and went out. No, the medic whispered, tapping the equipment. Ethan had his hands inside the wound, and suddenly there was only darkness and the sound of the rotors. It was the worst scenario. You can't stop, but you can't see. Flashlight now, Ethan ordered. Someone switched on a small tactical light, too weak, shaking with the vibration. And then came the phrase every doctor dreads: losing pressure, 70/30 and dropping. Ethan swallowed hard, because he knew what that meant. Either he found the bleeding in seconds, or the patient would slip away in his hands. He closed his eyes for half a second, like he used to in the desert when sand blinded him, and worked by touch. When the flashlight stabilized, the medic saw what Ethan had already done without seeing properly: a clamp in exactly the right place. My God. How did you? Ask later, because the worst was still ahead. The medic's voice cracked. We're almost out of saline. Ethan didn't look up. Then we ration. No waste. The helicopter jolted hard, like it had hit an invisible wall. Instruments rattled. The tactical light swung, and for half a second the wound disappeared again. Turbulence, someone shouted. The monitor beep sped up, then stuttered. Sats dropping, 81. Ethan's jaw tightened. He could handle blood. He could handle dark. But oxygen? Oxygen was a countdown you couldn't negotiate with. He leaned closer to the patient's face, watching the lips fade, and made a decision that would either save the man or finish him. Prep the airway, Ethan said. Now. For the next 20 minutes, Ethan existed in a state of absolute focus. The helicopter vibrated. The engine screamed. The medics called out vitals in a rhythm that became background music to his work. He sutured the intestinal tier, irrigated the peritoneal cavity with what sterile saline they had, placed a drain, and closed the abdominal wall in layers. BP's 98/60, the medic announced. O2 sat climbing, 89, 91. Temperature? Still 94.2, but rising. Ethan stepped back, his gloves slick with blood, his scrubs soaked. He's stable enough for transport. Get Hopkins on radio. Tell them we have surgical field closure of penetrating abdominal trauma with bowel repair. We'll need immediate rewarming and hyperbaric treatment for decompression sickness. ETA? 12 minutes. The helicopter descended toward the Hopkins Trauma Center. Ethan watched the patient's vitals hold steady, watched color begin to return to the man's face. Another life pulled back from the edge. The familiar satisfaction settled over him, not pride, exactly, but the quiet certainty of purpose fulfilled. They landed on the helipad. Hopkins' trauma team swarmed the helicopter, transferring the patient with practiced efficiency. The lead surgeon, a woman Ethan vaguely recognized from a conference years ago, glanced at the surgical site and whistled. You did this in flight? Didn't have a choice. Hell of a job, doctor. She supervised the gurney's departure, then turned back. We'll take it from here. You saved his life. On the helipad, a resident rushed past Ethan and dropped information like a bomb without realizing it. The ECMO's contested today. 2 machines are already occupied. Ethan stopped. Rivergate had an old, failing ECMO and was still counting spreadsheets instead of replacing it. If that system had broken down earlier, how many lives had already been on the edge because of administrative decisions? His firing wasn't just about disobeying directives. It was about him seeing what no one wanted seen. And for the first time since leaving Lynn's office, Ethan understood. This wasn't over. It had just begun. The return flight took 15 minutes. Ethan sat in the jump seat, suddenly aware of the fatigue in his hands, the ache in his lower back from the awkward surgical position. The medic who'd assisted him offered a bottle of water. Sir, that was? I've never seen anything like that. Ethan drank, the water cutting through the metallic taste of adrenaline. You just do what needs doing. When they landed back at the park, the crowd had tripled. News vans had arrived. The officer helped Ethan down, and the moment his boots hit pavement, Sophie broke free from Mrs. Chun and sprinted toward him. Dad, he caught her, lifted her despite his exhaustion, buried his face in her hair. Hey, butterfly. I'm okay. You were so brave. She pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. Everyone was watching on their phones. The news said you're a hero, and the crowd agreed. People were clapping. The officer stood at attention and saluted formally. Dr. Carter, on behalf of the United States military and the family of the man you just saved, thank you for your service. Again, the cameras captured it all, the salute, Sophie in his arms, the blood on his scrubs. Ethan saw Lynn Wexler at the edge of the crowd, her face the color of chalk. She was talking rapidly on her phone, gesturing. The officer approached her. "Ma'am, I understand you're an administrator at Rivergate Medical Center? I'm the director of operations, yes. And you're aware of Dr. Carter's capabilities?" Lynn's mouth worked. We had a personnel disagreement about... Let me be clear. The officer's voice carried across the park. The man you're looking at is one of 12 physicians in the country rated for extreme environment surgical intervention. He saved American lives in places most people can't pronounce. And about an hour ago, I was informed his employment with your facility was terminated. The silence was profound. Lynn's face went from white to red. That was a separate administrative matter regarding. I don't care what it was regarding. The officer turned to Ethan. Dr. Carter, whatever they were paying you, I guarantee you can do better. You've got my card. As the applause rose, Ethan's phone vibrated again, this time with a blocked number. He ignored it. It rang again. Then again. Across the park, Lynn was still on her phone, speaking fast, smiling too hard, like someone already writing the headline. A notification popped up on Ethan's screen. Rivergate statement draft for approval. He opened it and felt heat rush to his face. Rivergate Medical Center is proud to announce that our physician, Dr. Ethan Carter, successfully performed. Our physician. They had fired him less than an hour ago. And now they were trying to claim him, claim the rescue, before the truth about the ECMO ever surfaced. Ethan looked for Marlene in the crowd. She had stepped back, disappearing behind strangers, like someone who just realized the hospital didn't only destroy careers, it destroyed people. Ethan locked his phone, jaw tight, because now he understood. Saving a life in the air was the easy part. The fight would start on the ground. 3 hours later, Ethan sat in the same chair across from Lynn Wexler, but everything had changed. Her office now felt small, defensive. She'd removed her jacket. Her professional mask had cracked. On Lynn's desk, a second phone kept lighting up, call after call, legal, PR, board chair. She kept rejecting them like swatting flies, but her hands weren't steady. Ethan's eyes drifted to a printed document half hidden under a folder. He didn't need to read the whole thing. The header was enough. Crisis Communications Protocol. Lynn noticed his gaze and slid the paper away too fast. This isn't what you think, she said. Ethan finally spoke, quiet and sharp. You fired me. Then you tried to claim me. And now you're apologizing. Lynn's mask flickered. We're trying to protect the hospital. No, Ethan said. You're trying to protect yourselves. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was dangerous. Because both of them understood. If those ECMO copies surfaced, Rivergate wouldn't just lose money. It could get people killed. Dr. Carter, I want to apologize. The words clearly cost her. I made a decision based on incomplete information and organizational pressures that, in retrospect, were inappropriately prioritized. Ethan said nothing. He'd showered at Mrs. Chun's apartment, changed into the spare clothes he kept in his gym bag. Sophie was with Mrs. Chun, probably being fed cookies and allowed to watch more TV than usual. Lynn continued. The board has asked me to extend an offer of reinstatement. Full salary restoration plus a significant increase. We'd also like to discuss creating a position focused on patient safety protocols, giving you authority over equipment acquisition and clinical standards. The ECMO machine? Being replaced, we've expedited the order. It'll be installed within 3 weeks." Ethan leaned back. Through the window, he could see Baltimore's evening skyline, lights beginning to glow against the darkening sky. Somewhere in this city, the engineer he'd operated on was being rewarmed in a hyperbaric chamber, his body fighting to heal. Somewhere, Sophie was probably telling Mrs. Chun every detail of the helicopter's landing. "I want it in writing," Ethan said quietly. "All safety recommendations I submit get board review within 72 hours. Equipment purchases related to life-critical systems cannot be delayed for budget convenience. And I want a formal acknowledgement on record that delaying ECMO replacement constituted an institutional safety failure." Lynn swallowed. "Dr. Carter, those are my terms. You want me back, you accept that patient safety isn't negotiable. Ever. For any reason. The board will never. The board just watched me perform surgery in a helicopter on national news after you fired me for demanding basic equipment standards." Ethan stood. "I think they'll agree." Lynn stared at him for a long moment, then reached for her phone. "I'll draft the agreement tonight." 6 months later, Sophie sat at the kitchen table working on her homework. The sound of her pencil scratching across paper, mixing with the evening news playing softly in the living room. Ethan stood at the stove, stirring pasta sauce and monitoring the bread in the oven. "Dad, what's a synonym for brave?" "Courageous, valiant, intrepid." "What's intrepid mean?" "Fearless, basically. But with style." She giggled, wrote it down. The kitchen was warm, filled with the smell of garlic and tomato. Outside, an early winter snow was beginning to fall, covering Baltimore in clean white silence. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from the Hopkins trauma surgeon. "Patient discharged today. Full recovery. Wants to thank you in person." He smiled, typed back. "No thanks necessary. Glad he's okay." The ECMO machine had been installed on schedule. Ethan's new role as Director of Clinical Safety had come with a salary increase that meant Sophie's college fund was finally building at a reasonable pace. More importantly, he de-implemented protocols that had already prevented 2 equipment failures and caught 3 dangerous staffing shortages before they became crises. Lynn Wexler had resigned quietly 6 weeks after his return, taking a position at a hospital in another state. The new director of operations was a former physician who understood that cost-cutting and patient care weren't always compatible goals. Sophie finished her homework, bounded over to hug him from behind. "Dinner smells good." Another 5 minutes. He turned to face her, this small person who'd watched him lose everything and helped him remember what mattered. "How was school?" "Good. We're learning about heroes in history," Ms. Henderson said. "I could write about you. You're my doctor dad who saved someone in a helicopter." She grinned. "That's definitely hero level." They ate together, talking about her day, her friends, the science project she was planning. After dinner, Ethan helped her build a volcano model for the science fair while snow continued to fall outside. Later, after Sophie was asleep, he stood at his bedroom window looking out at the quiet street. He thought about the park where the helicopters had landed, about Lynn's office where she tried to make him choose between his principles and his paycheck. He thought about the engineer whose name he'd learned was Marcus, who'd called last week to say thank you, his voice still rough from the intubation but alive, present, grateful. The world was full of people who believed that the bottom line mattered more than the lives it was supposed to serve. But it was also full of people like Sophie, like the medic who'd assisted in the helicopter, like the nurses who'd quietly supported him even when it cost them political capital. Somewhere in Baltimore tonight, an ECMO machine was standing ready, maintained properly, capable of saving a life when the moment came. That mattered. The protocols he'd written mattered. The fact that he'd refused to compromise mattered. Doing the right thing was always right, even when it was hard. Sophie's third-grade teacher had gotten that exactly correct. Ethan pulled out his phone, opened the group text with the other trauma docs on staff. Tomorrow they had a meeting about expanding the rapid response team. There was work to do, lives to save, systems to fix one policy at a time. He typed a quick message confirming his attendance, then set the phone aside and went to check on Sophie one more time. She slept peacefully, her butterfly nightlight casting gentle shadows across the ceiling. Outside, the snow fell quietly over Baltimore, covering the streets where he'd walked carrying a cardboard box. And no prospects, transforming the park where his life had changed in the space of a helicopter landing. The city looked clean, new, full of possibility. Second chances were real. Families, chosen and built through love rather than just biology, were real. And integrity, the kind that cost you everything before it gave you what actually mattered, was the only foundation worth building on. Ethan's phone vibrated again, not Hopkins. An unknown number. He answered in silence. From the other side, a low voice. "Dr. Carter, you don't know me. But I know about the ECMO. I have copies." Ethan stood motionless, staring into the dark hallway as if the hospital had returned inside his home. "Who is this?" The voice took a breath. "Someone who still works there. And someone who could lose everything if you hang up." Before Ethan could respond, the call dropped. He saved the number, then deleted the call log. He stood holding the phone, hearing only the wind outside and the soft sound of Sophie's breathing as she slept. Because some decisions don't end when you win. They just change shape. If this story reminded you that standing up for what's right always matters, subscribe so you never miss stories about the people who choose courage when everything's on the line. Drop a comment telling us about a time you had to make a hard choice. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next one.